We're going to pop over to the voice you just heard is Kade Bolger, and he's out of Canada, and he's one of our regular members. I got to take the spotlight off of.
I got him.
There. All right, you got him now.
Yeah.
And I have to mention, folks, that Kade is performing a demonstration this Sunday on his network. And if you want a demonstration on an awesome little box bowl that he does, the detail is awesome. I told my wife today, I want to watch this just to see how he holds it. Because if you can hold it, you can turn it. And if you hold it right, you can turn it magnificently. And that's why I want to watch Kay do that this weekend. Tonight, we're going to watch Kay work with a skew and shows a couple of tricks there. So Kay, let's get into it if you would, please.
All righty. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, so today we're going to have a bit of a play with the skew, do practice stick, the fundamentals of the skew, learn how to do the cuts, that sweet spot where you want to stay, and what not to do. So I did a couple practice sticks today. Well, these two are practice sticks from when I do classes, my wood turning 101 class. So the first 2 days are always spindle turning and spindle work before we graduate into bowl turning. So they can understand how the tool has to be presented, ride the bevel, and how to manipulate that tool until you get into a cross grain orientation where you can get a violent catch in end grain. Okay, so this is a practice stick. All of these cuts were made with the skew. A cove with a skew. Yes, you can even make a cove with a skew. It's a lot easier and more resourceful to resort to a spindle gouge, but it is totally possible with the skew. So students always have to do these cuts with the skew first, and then they can try their spindle gouge and figure out which one they like to do. So here's another one here.
I like that.
Could almost be a candlestick. The flat
part
cuts,
part of a wig stand, Ronnie.
Yeah, or part of a wig stand. Yeah. So those two, we'll do one of these today. And then after that, we'll do a fun little project. I was playing around today, playing with shapes. And as I made this piece, it started to look like a figurine. So I did a little bit of a series, and some of you might have seen it on Facebook. It was, do you know the Skew Man? Yes, the Skew Man. He's a friend of the Muffin Man. Yes, the Muffin Man. Do you know the Muffin Man? So this is the Skew Man, and it comes with all the cuts of a skew. And after I did that, I thought, well, he might be lonely, so he needs a wife. So here's his wife with the top hat on. This is the skew woman. And recently, college let out, and their little teenage kid came home from college, and here he is here. Okay?
Right on.
He's got his little toucan. So there's their little teenage kid. And recently they were expecting. So they had a little newborn the other day. And here is their little baby newborn skew man. So I was just having some fun today, playing with the skew, making cuts for this demonstration today. So that's the project we will end with. A skew man or a skew woman, whichever comes, whichever I feel like at the time, but it'll probably be a little skew man. But we'll start off with the skew. Now the skew, there's many different types of skews on the market, and it really all comes down to woodturner's preference. So you have your standard rectangular flat skew. All skews have a 70-degree cutting angle, with a 25-degree bevel angle on either side. This is your normal skew, straight-sided skew. When you get a skew out of the box, or when you buy a skew, they don't really come in a box, but when you buy a skew, what you want to do is you want to soften these edges first off. Take a little file or take it to your belt sander and soften those edges, because when we use this skew, we ride along those edges to present the skew to make those cuts in these 4 fashions. So if you get a catch and you have a sharp corner there, it's going to make an indent or a little ridge in your tool rest. And then eventually you're going to have to sand and reflatten your tool rest, because if we come across using this skew and we get caught in one of those ridges, try and get out of that ridge and then, oh, catch. Okay, so you always want to soften those corners or have a rounded edge. So it is much easier to manipulate that tool, roll it over, but more importantly, it doesn't catch and create nicks in your tool mark that your tool gets caught in, and then you have to force it out, and then you run into a surprise. Okay.
I was asked in the past, why doesn't the manufacturers, why don't they do that?
I know, right? I don't know why they do that. It's probably too time consuming for them to do that on each individual tool when these are being banged out in a factory style. It would cost a lot more money for them to do that.
And that's exactly the truth. Because I questioned the manufacturer, and he said, oh no, I'll make you a rounded bottom. I'll make you an ellipse bottom. But if you want cheap, we'll give you square bottom.
Yep. Yeah. So this,
I do the same thing on the edges of my scrapers, even, because it doesn't take much for them to nick your tool rest.
Yeah, you want to do it on any of your bars, your tools that have rectangular bar shapes, you know, scrapers, negative rakes, skews, whichever.
Yep. Yeah, it's good to do on a scraper, because when you tilt it up to do that shear scraping, if you get a catch, you will nick and create nicks in your tool rest. So that is one style of a skew. It's your straight-sided skew, and it's rectangular on all 4 sides. That is a record power skew. Okay. My next skew I have is a Glenn Lucas skew. And this is a full curved skew. It still has a 70-degree cutting angle and a 25-degree bevel angle on either side. It is still used the exact same as the others. It just comes down to preference. If you want a curved skew, a straight skew, or a slight radius skew. Now, this one I tend not to use too much, but it does make a really nice negative rake scraper with that curve on bowls if you need to use it. Okay.
It tends not to plow on the corners if you ride down low.
Yes. Yeah. The next skew I have, so this is 1.25 inches. No. Yeah, 1.25 inches. This is 1 inch. I'll go the next size down. This is a 3/4 inch. Now this is a Thompson skew. When you get it, it's straight like this. So I reground it to put my grind on it that I prefer, which is a skew with a slight radius. And like Eddie said, it comes around those corners doing beads quite nicely without plowing through the edge of the timber. Okay. The Thompson skews are nice because on the bottom it's rounded over. So it's very nice for doing your beads and rolling around those corners, and we don't need to soften any sharp corners on that bar. It's only if you go to use the toe, you need to soften those corners here, okay? And my last but not least, sort of my go-to skew, is my 1/2 inch skew. This is a Benjamin's Best skew. It has a slight radius, 70-degree bevel, no, 70-degree cutting angle, and a 25-degree bevel angle. So when we use a skew, I'm actually going to just move these out of the way. Now there's several different types of cuts you can make with a skew. So I'm just going to throw on a little practice piece here. This is a piece of cherry. First thing we always want to do is find our centers. I used a center finder, and I find the centers on all four corners just in case it's not perfectly square. Split the difference of the rectangle, and I know dead center. Do that on both sides. I make a pin with my awl, after all, so it sits within these pins nicely. It's not so bad doing small items like spindles or tool handles or skew men or ornaments, but when you start getting into table legs, banister railings, to try and balance this in center and bring this up to center, it could be a balancing act and you could be chasing your tail. But by creating those pinholes, it sits where it needs to be, and it's quite easy to line up centered. Yeah. Now, they also have smaller skews on the market. You can buy a set of Henry Taylor miniature spindle tools, and his skew is 1/4 inch. Now, the smaller the skew, the smaller the sweet spot, okay? So whenever we use the skew, you want to stay within that bottom third or the top third. That all depends on where you are directly supported by the tool rest. Okay. So first off, I'll round this quickly. And a little bit of a safety disclaimer. Whenever we turn, we always wear our face shield, right? And we always wear safety glasses. Anything coming off the lathe can come off at a fairly fast rate, even a bottle stopper. And if that hit your orbital bone, it could do some damage. If that hit your eyeball, eyeballs would pop like grapes. So protect your face, protect your eyes. I recommend wearing a face shield at all times. Everyone can still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we got you.
Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to round this round. I could use a spindle roughing gouge, but since it is a skew demo, I will use a skew. Now, there's many different ways you can rough this out with a skew. You could come in on the end and take 1/8 of an inch cut straight across the side. But if you present that tool in the wrong fashion and you catch that end grain, it will be a violent catch. So I recommend doing it slightly different. Start on one end, make your entry, plateau. Work your way back, plateau, 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 and so forth until we have a cylinder, okay? And then I would come back in this direction, plateau, until I have a cylinder, okay? So you can rough turn square stock round with a skew. It's more usually fundamentally done with a roughing gouge. So I'm also wearing earplugs because I do enjoy my hearing. Woodturners often go deaf in their left ear, if not both ears, due to the sound of the chatter from the tool hitting the wood and the sound of the motor. So I wear a custom pair of earplugs, $150 for the pair, which is significantly less expensive than one hearing aid. But I will still be able to hear you if you ask a question. I will just shut the lathe down, ask again. I will remove my earplug, ask again, and I'll answer that question. So before I started the lathe, you saw I spun that piece of wood because we don't want any of those corners to hit your tool rest and become airborne. It could be a potential hazard if we have a 5 pound, or well, no, not 5 pound, maybe 2 pound piece of wood flying through the air, especially if you're not wearing your face mask. And my tool rest, since I am using the Skew, my tool rest is above center, okay? We can see that here. My tool rest is above center, so when I use my big Skew to rough this round, I am planing across the timber at 11 o'clock. So if this was a clock face, I position this tool at 11 o'clock. Now, when I am doing a planing cut, I have the toe up and the heel down. If I am going right to left, I have the toe up and I am proceeding in this fashion. I am riding on this corner. This is my fulcrum. Oh, I should have switched to the overhead. Sorry about that. So I would be trailing across the timber in this fashion, riding on this corner, which is my fulcrum. If I am coming across left to right, I switch hands. I am now on this corner, and I am riding across the timber in this fashion. Now, this is a planing cut, and you want to stay within that lower third. You can creep up to that center line, but don't go past that center line, because you are directly supported by the tool rest to be on that lower half or lower third. If I transfer the wood up past that halfway point, the Skew will then slam down, slamming into the wood, giving you a violent catch, because I have just transferred the weight to a portion of the tool that isn't directly supported by my tool rest. If I wanted to use the toe, I would position it in this fashion. So now I am directly supported to make that cut within the bottom third or the bottom half of that toe position, okay? You always want to be supported on the tool rest where you're making that cut, okay? Now I'll rough this round. Always anchor your tool, lie the bevel flat. I'm riding the bevel, it's not cutting yet. Now I tilt the handle up. I have initiated the cut, and I enter and plateau. Enter and plateau. Working my way back slowly. To rough this piece round. You see, I lie it on the timber and I'm cutting at 11 o'clock. I remove the tool, I glide across my tool rest, I present it again, riding the bevel, and then I tilt the tool up to present that bottom heel to present the cut. Okay, working your way across. Now I can't go here because I'll go directly into end grain, and if I present this tool wrong, I could have a catch. And it could damage my live center. So it's good to be ambidextrous with your Skew and switch hands. It takes a lot of practice though. I'm still not as good with my left hand, as I am with my right hand, because I'm right-handed. But you can always position your body by the headstock, hold it in your right hand, and create that cut in this fashion. Now, if I want to see if this is spinning around, don't put your fingers on there, because if it is still square, it will jam like a football. It could also pull your fingers in between that space. The wood will burn, the metal will cut. Okay? So lie your tool on top. You can see it's bouncing around on me. It's not quite round yet. So tools up high, ride the bevel, I bring it back. I present the cutter 45 degree to the wood, and the tool is a 45 degree to my tool rest. Okay? And I am cutting on that bottom third. If you're riding that bevel and you stay on that tool in the right position, you don't need that death grip. Okay? Okay. Back this way. Now that is a planing cut, where I am planing across the timber. It gives you a really nice finish, especially on your pens, your spindles. I love the Skew so much because it cuts your sanding down to virtually nothing, if any. Okay. I'm going to take a heavier cut here. Slow down, let the tool do the work. Now your planing cut gives you a really nice finish. I usually don't use that tool too much for a planing cut. I always resort back to my 1/2 inch. Now you can see when I went this way, I was taking a heavy cut, but due to the grain orientation and it curls up, it's actually an uphill cut. So I would want to lie the tool here and cut downhill, and I would have a finish like this. I'm not quite round yet, so I need to do one more pass. Now, you can do a planing cut with the toe as well. We just need to present that tool at that 45 degree angle. So now my tool is lying on my tool rest at maybe 10 degrees or so.
I muted myself, but that's a serious practice cut.
See those fine shavings?
Fine shavings, those be curlicues.
And it is one fluid motion. I lock that tool into my hip, I anchor it to the tool rest, and I move my body slowly and consistently. My legs will not get tired. If I'm trying to do it just by my arms, the vibration of the lathe will move the tool and then eventually catch. But if I'm doing this all day, flapping my wings, my arms are going to get tired and fatigued. When you get fatigued, that's when accidents happen. Okay? So it's much better to use your leg muscles than just your arm muscles. So you can see my arms don't move, but my legs are cascading across the piece, keeping that tool stationary and riding that bevel, staying on the bevel. Okay? And that gives you a really nice burnished finish, which takes very little sanding. So I could start sanding at 220 or 320. I wouldn't necessarily have to start at 80 when I do a plowing cut. Okay? And these are the nice long shavings you want when you're using a skew. That tells you that you're cutting and not scraping. Okay? Now we're going to create a series of cuts to practice the skew cuts. Now there's 5 different cuts, I think. I think I counted that right before the demo, but we'll see. Okay? Excuse me.
4 P's, V's, beads, and Co's.
Oh, sorry, I heard something. Was there a question?
Oh, no, I was just saying the 4 P's.
The 4 P's, sorry?
For the cuts: planing, peeling, paring, point cuts. Where the point cuts are the beads, V groove, and the other ancillary cuts.
Yeah. I never heard that before, but that's a good one. I thought of it as a planing cut, a peeling cut, an entry cut, a V cut, a bead cut, and a cove cut. Okay? And I will show you all those cuts right now. Now, why do you get a catch? What is happening when you get a catch and it creates that beautiful spiral design we all love to hate? I will show you that, and I will tell you that, okay? So you want to stay on that bevel, riding the bevel within that lower third. Now, the smaller the skew, the smaller the sweet spot. So when I teach the skew, all my students learn on a 1/2-inch skew, and you can always ramp up, you can always ramp down, but you get used to that small sweet spot, okay? So we already saw the planing cut, where I am riding across the timber at 11 o'clock, cutting with that bottom third, giving me those really long cuts, okay? Do it one more time here. So there is your planing cut. Now you can do a peeling cut. Now a peeling cut is just like a parting tool. You lie that bevel flat, and I lift the tool handle to initiate the peeling, and I lift and cut towards center, just as if I am using a parting tool. Now this is really good for when you're doing table legs, banister railings, stools, chairs, because there's my tenon that goes into my chairs, my spindles, my banister railings, okay? That is really the purpose of a peeling cut, okay? I can then come across here in a planing cut, and I can clean up that surface to a finished surface. I can also do a end grain bevel rubbing cut vertically down to clean up that surface as well. Now that is going to be your hardest cut with the skew by far, because you need to look up and over that toe right here. You need to look up and over that toe. I angle the tool slightly, so I'm riding the bevel in that bottom third, staying on the bevel, because I don't want to come down, contact the full bevel, and then skate, oh, spiral design this way. You want to have it slightly decanted, so you're only ever in contact on that bottom third, okay? And that gives you a really crisp corners to your chair legs, table legs, banister railings, and whatnot, where you have a mortise or a tenon that goes into a mortise, okay? Now your next cut is a V cut or an entry cut.
Excuse me.
Now you can do your entry cut with your heel. The only thing is you can't see over the toe. So sometimes, depending on your experience, if you're a beginner, doing this cut, since you cannot see what the cutter is doing, you might wiggle it or try and see what it's doing and then catch. It's much easier to make that entry cut with the toe of your skew, because now I can see over the heel and I can see what the tool is doing, okay? And when I do that, I'm above center, I lift the handle, I drop the tool, and I exit quickly, because that is the thinnest part of your skew. You don't want to keep that in there too long, because it will get black, it will lose its temper, and then you need to sharpen your skew again. Now that is your entry cut or your stop cut. So now anything I do on either side of that cut, that is where I stop. Now you can do a bead straight from there into that curve, just like so.
Change cameras.
You a really tight curve to your bead. Actually, I'll switch cameras and I'll do it again. So I ride the bevel, I'm at that center line. I didn't make a center line, but in the beginning, it's good to have a visual reference of where that center is. With experience, you won't need to make that line. So I lie the tool flat, I bring it back, I enter the cut with my toe, and I roll it up and around that corner into that tight space, and I release, giving me a tight curve to my bead. And I do the exact same over here.
Now you're rubbing the bevel all the way through this for guide.
Yes, I am riding the bevel all the way through that cut. So I'm above, riding the bevel, I bring it back, initiate the cut. Once I see dust, I initiate the cut and I roll the tool up and around that corner, and I end in a closed position, just the same as when I made that entry cut. Otherwise, that cutter will kiss the other side of that bead. So now I lie it flat here. I roll up and over and around, giving you very nice tight beads, okay? Now, that is a cut with the heel. Now, in the beginning, I found that tricky, because as I came around that corner, I can't see what that heel is doing. So you can also make those cuts with the toe, and you can exactly see what you're doing in those cuts. So just like when I lied the tool flat this way and I rolled over to here, I present the tool in the exact same fashion, but I am using the toe, not the heel. So I lie it flat, I initiate the cut with the toe, and I roll up and around that corner. This way, I roll up and around that corner, giving you some very nice beads. With that center line still there, I know that that's the highest side of that bead, and on either side of that bead, you try and mimic the curve of the bead on the opposite side so your beads match. There we go. Now we got matching beads. Now that is your bead cut. You can also do a V cut. If you want a much deeper bead with a tighter point, you can do a V cut. Now a V cut, I enter with the toe, I release. I keep the tool in that position. All I do is I turn it 45 this direction, and I lift my handle to make that V cut. Again, lift the handle to make that V cut. Now I'm back at my stop cut position. 45 degree this direction, enter, and I have that V cut. Okay. Now I can have a much deeper bead. So I'm going to just do the same over here. Oh, and over here. There. Now I have a V cut on either side of what is going to be a bead. You find your center, and those will be beads. This will have a deeper cove on one side and a shallower curve on the other. So I start, enter with the tip, roll up and around, and finish in your closed position. Again, on this side, I have flat, enter with the tip, and I roll up and around, and I finish at this position. Now you don't have to do it fast. I just find you have less vibration and less of a stutter if you do that fast. But you can still do it slow and controlled with practice. So here I enter, I come down and around this corner, and I finish here, okay? I start here, come up and around this corner, and I finish there. Now I have my bead cut. So we always start with an entry cut. You can make that entry cut into a V cut. Oh, there we go. Now you don't have to make those cuts quickly, but with practice you can. There we go. There we go. Now, why would I get a catch? Now, if I am planing across, why would I get a catch? If I come off that bevel and present that tool here, oh, I skated away. So if I am riding that bevel, I am not going to get that skate. Stay within that bottom third and stay on the bevel. But the moment I come off that bevel, oh, skate. Okay. It would also happen in this direction. If I am peeling, I lift the tool up off the bevel. Oh, it skates away in that fashion on me. Now, why does it skate away on you? Because the curve of the wood and the curve of your skew. So when I lift it off, it shoots in that direction following the curve of my skew. So to avoid those catches, just stay within that bottom third and maintain a bevel rubbing cut. Okay? So now you can do a cove. Now a cove cut you don't need to make an entry with a V, or you don't need to make a stop entry cut, period. Now, sometimes there's different kinds of beads. You have your round beads. You can also have a V-style bead. So here I will create a V-style bead. There. Now I have a V-style bead, and right next to it, I have a round bead. Okay. There. Still a little V-shaped, but you always want that high point in the center of your beads, whether it's a round bead, an oval bead, or a V bead. Now let's create a cove in between these two V cuts. Okay. Use my toe. I ride the bevel down. Clean up that cut. Now right in between here, I am going to create a cove. And in order to do that, I still need to ride the bevel. So I present the tool, ride the bevel, I initiate with the tip of my heel, and I cascade down into that plane. I cascade down into that cove, making a planing cut. Okay? It's a planing cut because I'm planing across the timber, and I am cutting downhill, and I am cutting with that bottom third. Okay? Now I stop at the bottom because rule of turning is we always do a downhill cut. We never make a uphill cut. So I need to switch. I enter on this side with the tip of my heel, and I enter and I cascade down to create that cove. I come back to blend the bottom of my cove, just like so. Okay. There. Now we have the 5 cuts of the skew. You have your planing cut, gives you a nice finish. You have your entry cut. There's your entry cut. We have our V cuts. We have our cove cut. We have our bead cut. Okay? So with all those cuts and using the skew, now we can create a skew man. Or are there any questions? Do you want me to do one of these again over here before we go into our little fun skew man project?
Hey, can I say something?
Yes.
Many of my students have a problem with the skew, not because they can't understand exactly what you're doing. Your demonstration is excellent, but they have a sharp corner on their skew blade, and a lot of their tool rests are not high-speed steel or soft iron. So I soften, I take the edge and I soften it because that skew will want to cut into the soft iron tool rest.
Yes. Yep. You always want to soften these edges because that's your fulcrum that you always glide across. And if you get a catch, that is what's going to indent your tool rest to the point where eventually you're going to have to file the top of your tool rest. But by softening those or having a round curve on the bottom, like the Thompson skew, you don't get those sharp corners that indent in your cast iron softer steel.
Correct. It helps the student operate the skew a lot easier.
Yes. Yeah. I did learn on this skew, and I found with these straight corners and not having that slight radius, you will catch that corner a little easier coming around those corners on the opposing bead. But it is totally possible with this skew with practice. I just now prefer a skew with a slight radius. Like Eddie said, it's easier to come up and around that corner without plowing through the wood. Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder how a skew works with the lathe turned off. Take a regular pocket knife and make these cuts by just turning the wood on your own. Do not turn the power on. Make these cuts after you go clean these cuts up using a regular pocket knife, and you will understand how that tool cuts. And if we look at it that way, we'll understand the physics of it. Yes.
So here is my pocket knife or my skew. Now, if I'm doing an entry cut, I make that entry cut just like that. I would make my V cut, enter this way and enter that way. A planing cut, we would be coming across the timber in this fashion to give a peeling cut. Now, yes, do practice it without the lathe on. You can see here. I haven't done it with my pocket knife yet. I thought about trying it with the power on, but I was quite nervous to do so.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do it. It's not safe. If you get a catch, you don't have a long enough handle on that knife to keep it in your hand. And it can come flying through the air and stick somewhere you don't want it to stick. Okay?
Yeah, I think what Eddie was meaning is if you've done any whittling, like with a pocket knife on a limb or any kind of a stick or a piece of wood, if you haven't, practice some whittling. Get you a good sharp pocket knife and practice some whittling, and you'll understand how the blade of that skew cuts.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yep. Yep, that's a great point. So I can do a few more cuts here, or we can just throw on the fresh piece of wood.
Let's go to
why don't?
Can you
Pardon?
turn a couple more beads on that section?
Sure.
The problem is I can't get the participants off my screen, and it blocked that part of the view.
Sorry?
I'm having a technical problem that I can't pull the participant window up, and it stays on my screen, so the right third of my screen is blocked.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's no problem. I can do the exact same cuts on this side. It won't take too long. Alrighty. Now, since I'm shut down for a sec, I'm going to resharpen my skew. Now, some people say go to the grinder and sharpen it. It only takes seconds. I hone it with a card scraper. It doesn't take me any much longer than to use the grinder, but it significantly allows my tool to last much longer. So I only grind my skew maybe every 4 to 6 months, and I hone it in between. So I've had this skew for 11.5 years, and I've only lost maybe an inch, okay? If I went to the grinder, I would have had to replace a skew every 6 months, like Steve Jones does, okay?
Yeah, because
I use my skew daily.
You're throwing the steel on the floor. You don't have to do that when I don't believe in grinding. And when you said shaping that one with slight curve, that's what God gave us belt sanders for.
Yep. Belt sanders do work well for sharpening as well. So when I sharpen this, I lie this flat so the bevel is in contact, and I bring it back, riding that bevel till I get to that point. Now you need to slow down because we don't want to slip and go through our hand, okay? You can also, if you're nervous about doing it that way, you can do short little strokes back and forth as I move that tool from heel to toe. giving me a nice fresh bevel. Right, where is it? Right there, that I can cut on. And it's sharp again. And I do that on both sides. Make sure you maintain bevel rubbing because we don't want to round that edge over. And now my skew is sharp again. And I lost maybe a micron of steel rather than a couple millimeters. Now, planing cut. You don't always have to anchor, bring it back, ride the bevel, initiate the cut, but I find by doing so, it makes you think for a second exactly what you're doing, and you always present that tool correct. With experience and practice, you will be able to get that angle right off the hop. But if you hesitate, you might present that tool wrong, giving you a catch. So I find it's always safest practice. It takes 2 seconds. Ride the bevel, bring it back 45 degrees to the timber, initiate that cut, lock it in on your hip, and just cascade across the timber, moving my legs, not my arms. Okay? Now I peeling cut. I lie the tool flat. I bring it back like a parting tool. This cut is perfect for doing the mortise for your table legs, your banister railings, your chair legs. Okay? The next cut is your stop cut or your entry cut. Now this is the basis of all beads or V-cuts. Okay? And we'll leave that part for a cove. So you can create a bead You can mark your centers for a visual. This one I won't. You always lie the tool flat at that center line, enter with the heel, and I cascade up. Whoop, you see, as I came up, I came off the bevel and it skated away on me. That is going to be a longer tenon for a mortise now. So in order to do that bead, we lie the tool flat and bring it back, enter with the heel, and we cascade up and around that corner, maintaining bevel rubbing support. I came off the bevel, so it skated back on me. Here I do the exact same, roll up and around. Up and around, up and around. Now that will give you a very nice shallow type point to your bead. If you make the bottom of your bead in the bottom of that entry cut, okay, there. This I'll just clean up, take off that high side, blend into the corner. There.
James,
Tight curve, so I use my toe to blend the bottom of that bead. I can do it again here. Lie it flat, bring the bevel back, initiate the cut with the tip of the heel, and you cascade down and around that curve into that bottom of that cove. Now I just need to, I missed a spot. It wasn't quite sharp on that heel. So I'm just going to hone it quickly again.
While you're doing it, I gotta let you know that Brenda and James think you're a hero because you got catches and lived through it.
Enter up and around that corner. Oh, see what a difference that is with a sharp tool? I didn't have to force it. There we go. There. And that will give us a series of beads. Now you don't want them to be, you want the same profile on either side. So you can always go back and clean that up. There we go. Ooh, a little bit of a catch. There we go. So there's a series of beads. Now this one isn't quite the same. I guess I can be a little anal when it comes to attention to detail. Everything has to be the same. Okay. Now if I want that bottom of that bead to be deeper, there. You can do a series of V cuts. Now if I make my entry, I leave it where I made my entry. I angle it at a 45 and I just lift my tool handle. Again, same position, lift the tool handle. Back to center, 45, lift the tool handle. Okay? There, and that is a V cut. Now I do that on either side, which gives me a much deeper cove to that bead. Okay? Yeah, might as well do it here so everything's uniform. You can find your center line. Now to do this bead, I will do one with the heel and one with the toe. Now the heel, lie flat, that center line, we enter with the tip of the heel, and we come down and across that curve, just like so. Okay? Again, we lie it flat, enter with the heel, come down and around that corner. Oh, here. And stop there. A little bit of a high side here, so I can blend that, take that off. Yeah. I was just trying to clean up the high side and not come all the way around. But sometimes it's easier just to do one more pass of the full curve because you might have a little bit of a stutter or a step just trying to take off that one side. You'll catch the cutter edge and it will give you a flat side, and then you have to do it all over anyway. So now with the toe, I would lie the toe flat at that center line. I enter with the tip, I'm riding that bevel, and I come down and around that corner. I flip it to my other side, other fulcrum, lie it flat at that center line, enter with the tip, and I roll it down and around that corner, just like so. Okay? Now for a cove, which we'll do here, you can do it both ways. I'll do one with the toe and one with the heel. There we go. One will be with the toe and one will be with the heel. So if I'm using the heel, I lie it flat. I line up that angle, initiate the cut with the tip. I cut downhill and I move my body to the tailstock and cascade the tool down, flat, and up. I'll show you my body position as I make that cut, okay? So I enter the cut, everything's locked in, enter with the tip of my heel, and I move my body towards my tailstock and back. Now to make the cut on this side, I enter here, and I come back towards the tailstock, okay, to create that curved cove, okay, and then I come back down in this fashion just to blend the two high sides, or the two low points actually. There we go. Now that was with the heel. Now I'm going to do one with the toe. And this is how I do my finials. You know, when you have a bulb going to a long concave finial, I'll just grab one quickly here. Now all my skews and all my boxes, the whole outside profile of this is turned with the skew. The finial, the body of the box and all, okay? Because it is spindle orientation. So when I do this skew, or my finial with the skew, this concave cadence, I cut with the toe of my skew, okay? So I enter here, and I come down and up and across, just like so. I come back in this direction, and again, I always stay within that bottom third. I never contact that whole tool, and I never contact past that center point, okay? If I have a rough spot there, I just come back and blend it again. There. Now we have a little bit of a line there, which can sometimes be tricky to take out with the toe. So I just switch to my heel and I clean up the bottom just like so. I also needed to switch to the heel because using the toe, my heel is liable to catch the top of this bead and the top of that bead, okay? So that is how we do a planing cut, a peeling cut, an entry cut or a stop cut, a V cut, your beads, and your coves, okay?
Or as Dane says, all the peas and then some more, right, Dane?
Absolutely.
Yep. So yeah, those are all the cuts created with the skew.
Well done.
Very nice.
And very minimal sanding. I could start sanding, well, except for that little catch there. I could start sanding at 240 and finish at 320. So now, this won't take too long. We'll have a little bit of a fun and we'll create a bust of a skew man. I just came up with this today. I was playing around, practicing my skew. I think this might be my warm-up. My warm-up for whenever I have a spindle day of production turning, table legs, banister railings, and whatnot. I will start with a fun project turning a skew man.
Hard to imagine you needing to practice some skill.
You always need practice with the skew. I find if I go on vacation or I'm away for a week, well, first of all, I'll start getting withdrawals because I haven't made anything within a week, and I'm away from my lathe for a week. But you can get rusty if you tend to shy away from certain tools. And I mean, I did it in the beginning. I was always scared of the skew because I kept getting that pretty little spiral design that skates away on me until I really took the time to break it down. What am I doing wrong? Why is that happening? I'm riding the bevel. Oh, it's because I came up off the bevel and that curve shoots you in the opposite direction. And now it's my favorite tool because I don't like sanding, okay? And it significantly cuts down your sanding. So I'll just rough this round quick. I'll switch back to my 1.5 inch skew. Not quite round yet. Oh, here, keep my head out of the way here. I'll turn it over here. There we go. It's not bouncing around on me. No, it is over here. There we go. Now we'll do one final pass to give me that nice finished surface to start with. Now, if you really want to get finicky or try something, a parting tool is a miniature skew, okay? But with this small of a surface, that sweet area is now less than 1/8 of an inch. But this can still be used as a skew.
Now you're starting trouble.
Which is why that's called a beating
really
and parting
nice
tool.
finish.
Go off.
So now we'll start with our little, first off, we did a planing cut. Now my skew man consists of all the cuts you will ever do with a skew. Okay. First one is a peeling cut. To define the top hat of my skew man. Ride that bevel down that vertical edge, cleaning up the top hat portion of your skew man. Okay. Oh, tiny little spot there I missed. Now sometimes it's hard to get in there and see the heel connect with that tight point. So you can also clean up that fuzz where those 2 points connect with your toe. Okay. Now here I make my entry cut. Actually, that's a little too far up. And then I start a beginning of a cove. Okay. And I am stopping where I meet that line. Now I do a vertical cut down across that end grain to clean up that surface. And there is our top hat and the forehead of our Skew man. There. Now we make another V cut here, and that is going to be the bottom of the head. That's going to be his shoulder. This will be the body. That will be his legs. And this will be a couple beads for a pedestal for him to stand on. A bead at the bottom and a cove in between. Okay? So we start off, we made our entry cut, V cut. Oh, there we go. Now before I go too deep, I wanted to find the head. So I lie the tool flat on that corner on the flat part where I planed. I enter with the tip of the heel, and I am basically doing a half bead. Okay. There we go. Now there is his hat and his head. Now I need to define his shoulder. So I'm going to do a V type bead. There we are. Now I need to do a series of V cuts here just to get deep enough. There we go. There's his shoulder. Now I need to clean up the bottom of his head where it comes into his neck. There we are. And around that corner, clean up my V cut here. Now we'll do a torso. So this is the torso. This will be a V cut, half a bead. There we go. Now I'm at the depth. Now this is just a elongated bead for the body of a dad bod. So you got a little bit of a keg rather than a six-pack. Okay?
I am just amazed that Ronnie left that alone.
There we go. I had to take that cut in 2 passes because I was taking too heavy of a cut at first. And I started to bury the tip of the heel in that end grain. If I kept going and twisted this, oh, catch. We're not hitting the wall today on race day. Okay. So I'm up. I just need to blend this to match the top. There we go. Now we have our torso. We have our body, our shoulder, our head, and our top hat. Now I need to taper this down to create the legs. Do a half bead here, which is his hip. Okay. I can clean this up with my toe. There we go. Yep. Now I just need to create a taper, which is the exact same as one side of a cove. Clean up that little flat spot. There we are. Now I need to remove that. Now, oh, I didn't make it all the way to the where my bead begins here. So I'm just going to blend that there. There we go. There we go. Now we have our beads, which are going to be the pedestal he sits on, or he's standing on. Here we are. So to initiate these beads, we can mark our center lines. Now this bead here, I have to be careful because I don't want to touch that spur drive with my skew. I will definitely have to go back to my grinder. There we go. There's a little bead. I'll make a V cut here. Make a V cut here. A V cut there. A V cut here. So all our beads are down at the exact same height in the cove. Okay. Now I'll do one with the heel and one with the toe. There we go. Lay it flat, come up and around that corner. One more. There we go. If you're ever going to touch the piece, always touch it back here. You don't want any chance of your fingers getting in between here. Okay? I just wanted to get that little bit of fuzz off of there so I can see my connection points. So I can have a really nice crisp join where that bead and that concave connect. Now this one I will do with the toe. So I lie the toe flat, enter with the toe, and I come up and around that corner just like so. And just like so. There we go. I have a high side and a high side. We'll clean that up. There we go. There we go. And now this is going to be a cove. Actually, excuse me, I'm just going to get rid of this little pencil line. There we go. Okay. Now my cove, I enter with the tip of my heel and I cascade back, stopping at that center line because, oh, a little bit of a catch because I caught the corner. That's okay. There, now we'll re-enter. There we go. My head's not in the way, I'll move over here. There. Now, if I wanted to sand that, I would be able to start sanding at 220 or 340 and finish sanding at that exact same grit. But we don't need to watch me sand. So all I need to do now is just get a couple dabs of paint on there. And we'll have our little Skew man. And the paints I'm using, just for fun, are some acrylic-based paints that I got from, some are from Michael's, some are from Walmart. Pretty much all the same, if they're acrylic-based. Now my lathe is off, so I can remove my face shield. I'm still leaving my safety glasses on, just in case, I don't know, something wafts through the air or my heavy-handed painting pops this off the lathe. So now to frame in the face, I actually use the grain patterning in the wood. So I can see here, I have the peaks and valleys and the grain lines within the wood. So that's what I use to frame in my eyes, and I center it that way. So there's one eye. Your next eye will go on the exact same portion of that curve right under the flat side, so it's uniform. Okay? And then the mouth, the first thing I do with the mouth, I do this same technique when I do snowmen and all my snowman ornaments. I always do the center one first, okay? And then I move them out from there. To get a uniform face and smile. Now, I need to clean my paintbrush, so I wipe them on my work pants here. It's okay, I do the laundry. And then I have a little bit of brown for his nose. And I do a little bit of a triangle type nose. Here we are. Oh, to a point. And there we have our Skew man.
Yeah. He looks good.
It is beautiful.
Great
Beautiful.
job, kid.
Very good job, Kate.
Very
Thanks,
good.
everyone.
Great demo, Cade. One point
Great
on
demo,
sand.
Cade.
One point
Thank you
on
so much.
sanding. A lot of people. Hold on. Okay, a lot of people will think I don't have to sand after getting that really nice finish off a Skew, but that's not the case. While you did get a really clean cut and you do get that burnishing, a lot of times that burnishing is just the polishing of the laying down of the fibers. And if you don't sand them at least at 240, then the finish can actually raise that grain back up. So you don't be trapped into thinking you don't have to sand after getting such a clean cut.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to sand. You can start at well, it's good to sand. I wouldn't say not to sand, depending on the project, but it significantly cuts your sanding down by far. So rather than starting at sanding at, say, 100 or 80 if I'm doing plowing, now I can start sanding at 240 and finish at whatever grit I desire to go to. So for instance, with that, I would probably start sanding and stop sanding at 320. If I had a little bit more of a steady hand or, well, the one I did this afternoon, this guy, I started sanding, this guy, I started sanding and finished sanding at 400. So, I mean, it just significantly lowers your rate of sanding, and it takes away that fuzz. But
yeah,
if you use an alcohol-based
Right.
finish, it won't raise the grain. If you use a water-based finish, it will raise the grain.
I want to throw a nickel on the table here that sanding is directly linked to the slicing or cutting that you do, because you did not keep running that tool over the cut to burnish it into shape because you wanted to get a shape. You sliced the wood away to accomplish the shape. And when you sliced the wood away, you didn't compress the fibers. You removed them. And what do you do with the sanding? You remove the fibers.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I noticed when you did the beads with the heel versus the toe, when you used the toe, you were coming straighter into the wood, almost like you did with the peeling cut and the V cut. When you did the heel, you were having more of a slicing cut. Do you see a difference in the finish of the wood and between those two?
Let me see.
You approached the wood at a more of a slicing angle when you did the heel. But the toe, you were more, it was more of a peeling cut.
I can't remember exactly which ones I did the heel and the toe with, but they do look fairly similar. You will most likely get a better cut with the heel, because with the heel, we have the tool at that skewed angle. So the fibers are coming down across that angle. At the toe, you're more at a flat angle. It's still slightly skewed, but not nearly as much. So
Yeah.
I do get a better finish.
That's what I was bringing. It was coming in almost as a flat angle with the toe when you did it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's very minimal. You can hardly see the difference, but wood turners will point it out. The homeowner wouldn't. The homeowner wouldn't.
Kate, I have to say this was one awesome demonstration, and I very much appreciated the details on how you can join him on Sunday for his pay-per-view. I'm going to call it that. But if you'd like to see another great demonstration by Kate, you can do that